Coming up, we're featuring a classic 1980 record from one of the most diverse bands of the era. These masters of hook-laden pop ditties had a knack for always hitting pay dirt. And they did it with a fistful of rock and new wave. Unfortunately, this time they had a hitless album on their hands. Or at least that's what their label told them after listening to it. The record, they said, was just too different from anything they'd ever done. They didn't hear anything. They didn't hear a hit. This unusual collection got no love from the music industry till it scored 2 chart-topping hits and it reached platinum status in the US. It was all due to today's featured track, a cover of an obscure song that became a personal favorite of one of the Fab Four. In fact, it ended up replacing him at number 1. Sadly, though, this record was the end of an era for this band. Worn down by a never-ending workload and label pressure to stay on top, these guys just bottomed out. But was it really the end? We're going to find out next on Professor of Rock. Hey music junkies, Professor of Rock, always here to celebrate the greatest artists and the greatest songs of all time. You know, if you ever wore superhero underoos, you're going to dig this channel of deep musical nostalgia. Make sure to subscribe below right now, click the big red button, click the bell so you always know when our stuff's coming out. I know you'll find something to dig on this channel. We have some great interviews coming out. We also have a Patreon. You're going to want to check that out. That helps to keep it a daily channel. So let's get into it. So after teaming up with powerhouse producer Mike Chapman in the late 70s, the iconic and eclectic band Blondie released a number of commercial hits, gaining a strong following in the UK especially, with 8 top 15 singles, including the number 1 hits Heart of Glass and Sunday Girl. Picking up steam in the States, Heart of Glass also took number 1, and hits like One Way or Another and Dreaming both cracked the top 30, especially One Way or Another being one of the big hits from that time.
One way or another, I wanna find a and tell you of my dreaming.
With the classic lineup of Debbie Harry on lead vocals, Chris Stein and Frankie Infante on guitar, Jimmy Destri on keyboards, Nigel Harrison on bass, and Clem Burke on drums, Blondie scored 2 US platinum albums with Parallel Lines and Eat to the Beat. Shifting into the 80s, though, the band teamed up with disco godfather Giorgio Moroder for the American Gigolo smash hit Call Me, which we covered a couple months back. It was a wild ride for the band, who in the space of just a couple of years had risen to the peak of the industry, one of the biggest bands. Enter today's featured track, The Tide is High from Blondie's 5th studio album, Auto American.
The tide is high, but I'm holding on.
The band would re-enlist the expertise of producer Mike Chapman for this record, and as Blondie's label Chrysalis Records looked ahead to the project, they no doubt had dollar signs in their eyes. I mean, over the past couple of years, Blondie had become a cash cow for them. They were very nonplussed when they discovered Blondie was making a concept album. Explaining the idea behind Auto American, Debbie Harry said that it was supposed to be a very different album from their previous record, Eat to the Beat. She said, "We very much wanted to create a work that went beyond what Blondie was known for. We wanted to make music that would cross over these boundaries, bring people together." Auto American's theme was actually diversity, musical, cultural, and racial. There are all sorts of different musical styles in there: rap, reggae, rock, pop, Broadway, disco, even jazz. In other words, Blondie was determined to do something very radical. By the early 80s, they were being pegged as new wave, but Blondie was bigger than any one genre. Diversity was the name of the game always with this band.
I'm gonna be your number one.
They were about breaking down barriers and exceeding people's expectations for what music could be. Not exactly sharing Blondie's noble vision, though. Chrysalis was perplexed when they heard the finished record. In fact, they demanded to know, where are the hits? They just didn't hear any. But Debbie Harry and the band, they just ignored them. They'd been through all this, on previous albums. They'd heard this all before. They knew the hits were there.
I'm not the kind of girl who gives up just.
So released in November of 1980, Auto American likewise garnered negative reviews from the music press early on. But none of that really mattered because the music buying public, they made their voices heard with the almighty dollar. Auto American became Blondie's third straight platinum album. Embraced by a variety of radio formats, it was as popular as its predecessors. It ultimately reached number 7 on the Billboard 200 during a very competitive time in the music industry. I mean, the thing about Auto American is that it was groundbreaking. And the trend-chasing music industry rarely recognizes a groundbreaking record, when they hear one. I mean, take, for instance, the album's second single, Rapture. Do you think anyone in the industry got it at that time? Written by Deborah Harry and Chris Stein, Rapture brought rap to mainstream American audiences for the very first time. Very first number 1 rap hit. Likewise, Auto American's lead single, The Tide is High, helped propel another burgeoning genre to the forefront of American radio, reggae. Reggae-inspired hits had, of course, already had success on the Hot 100, clear back in the 70s, from Johnny Nash's I Can See Clearly Now in 72.
I can see clearly now, the rain is gone.
Eric Clapton's transformation of Bob Marley's I Shot the Sheriff in 74.
I shot the sheriff.
To, Roxanne would just cover that with the Police. But as the 80s opened up, the release of Blondie's The Tide is High would prove to be a pivotal moment for shining a spotlight on the genre in the US. Debbie Harry and Chris Stein wrote a lot of Blondie songs, but they weren't the only ones. And with so many writers in the band, Blondie usually tried to stick with their own material. However, The Tide is High was an exception to the rule. This track was originally written by John Holt and recorded by the Jamaican band the Paragons, which featured him as the lead singer. It was released in 1967, their version. The song found little in the way of commercial success back then, yet it was smooth enough to capture the attention of Harry and Stein over a decade later. Actually, during a visit to London, Debbie Harry picked up a tape that included the Paragons, The Tide is High. It was on it. She absolutely loved the song. This is what Harry said about it, and I'll quote exactly. She said, it was on a compilation tape that someone gave us when we were in London. Chris fell madly in love with the song, as did I, and we just decided to go for it. We thought it was a potential hit song. I'm gonna be your number 1. To flesh out the track, though, Blondie wanted to recruit the talents of the British ska band The Specials. But unfortunately, The Specials turned him down. So Mike Chapman brought in session musicians to help complete this song, including 3 extra percussionists. String and horn arrangements were added to, evoke the Caribbean sound. Blondie's version, it closely parallels the Paragons' version, although as Debbie Harry pointed out, the harmonies are slightly different because theirs are men's voices, so they're hitting some lower notes than I would hit. Her words. Now, when this song was finished, it gave Mike Chapman the chills. And right then and there, he declared it a number 1 record. In his exact words, he said, the track felt perfect. The percussion players, they added the next dimension. Debbie's vocal was magic, and the strings and the horns put it over the top.
It's not the things you do that tease and hurt me bad.
There was not much question as to whether The Tide is High would be Auto American's first single at all. I think it was just an obvious choice, is what Deborah Harry would say. This even despite the reservations from the label, from Chrysalis. So The Tide is High was released on October 31st, 1980 on Halloween. It debuted on the Hot 100 2 weeks later at number 81. By January 31st, 1981, it would claim the number 1 position, notably overtaking John Lennon's Just Like Starting Over for the top spot. Just like starting over. Now, I mentioned that in particular because there's actually a cool anecdote that connects Lennon to The Tide is High. John Lennon was, of course, tragically shot and murdered on December 8th, 1980, right at that time. This was a little more than a month after The Tide is High was released. And it was just weeks after the release of his fifth studio album, Double Fantasy. So actually in 2006, John Lennon finally remembered his dad dancing around the house while listening to Blondie's Titus High. Of the cherished memory, Sean would say, and I quote, "My father had an old Wurlitzer. It was in the game room of our house on Long Island. It was filled with 45s, mostly Elvis and the Everly Brothers. The one modern song, though, that I remember him listening to was the Titus High by Blondie, which he played constantly. When I hear that song, I see my father, unshaven, his hair pulled back in a ponytail, dancing to and fro in a worn-out pair of denim shorts with me at his feet, trying my best to coordinate tiny limbs." Apparently, the Titus High by Blondie was John Lennon's favorite song at that time, so I guess it is fitting that, just like Starting Over, passed off the torch to the Titus High, which became Blondie's third U.S. #1 single. Rapture, of course, would soon follow on its heels, becoming Blondie's fourth #1.
But it's the way you do the things you do to me.
The Titus High also reached #1 on the Cashbox chart. It also went to #1 on the Dance Club chart, #3 on the Adult Contemporary chart. So it was a true triple threat, just a cross-genre smash, just like the band wanted. Elsewhere, it went to the top 10 in at least 10 countries, including #5 in South Africa and Switzerland, #4 in Netherlands, Belgium, and Australia, #2 in Ireland, and #1 in Canada and the United Kingdom.
I'm not the kind of girl who gives up just.
I actually have a story with my dad on this one. I remember I heard this song as a little kid on the radio all the time. I heard it so much, I actually got my dad into Blondie as a band. I kept telling him, "You gotta buy this record, Dad," whenever it would come on the radio. And he finally did, and he wasn't a fan of the band before that. He really started liking their stuff and bought their other albums, so that was pretty cool. Now, as we continue to break down this classic, I do want to thank our sponsor, Zenni Eyewear. The glasses I always wear on the show. Zenni is having incredible deals right now on their frames. You can actually get 3 or 4 pair for what one would cost you elsewhere. And you can design your own look with so many different styles to choose from. Quality, it's amazing. And you can even do a virtual try-on before you buy to see exactly how you're going to look. Click on our special info button right up here to get 80% off regular retail prices. Check it out.
Like that. Oh no.
So in terms of pop culture, the Titus High has appeared in several television shows and movies, including Muriel's Wedding, The Last Days of Disco, Will and Grace, The Wire, Everybody Hates Chris, Family Guy.
I'm gonna be your #1.
The Romanoffs, and Better Call Saul. It's cool how they used it there.
The tide is do that tease and put me back.
The Titus High has also been covered by artists like Gwen Stefani,
I'm gonna be your #1.
Tori Amos, Bodines, Arcade Fire, Elvis Costello did it, Patti Smith, and Maxi Priest.
I'm gonna be your #1.
Also, there was the British group Atomic Kitten, who covered the song in 2002, and they returned the Titus High to #1 on the UK singles chart, and it also went top 5 through much of Europe, as well as #4 in Austria and #1 in New Zealand. So after scoring 2 #1 hits off Auto American, Blondie brought their US #1 hit total up to 4. 4 #1 hits in the space of just 2 years. Really impressive feat that helped cement them as one of the biggest bands of their day for sure. From the outside looking in, it seemed like Blondie was poised to rule the 80s. Unfortunately, though, the monstrous success of Auto American was something of the last hurrah for this band, at least in this incarnation. It's been well documented that the band members were all suffering through heavy drug use by this point, most likely as a way to cope with the fatigue of the years of constant touring and recording and putting themselves out there. Things were really falling apart for Blondie at this moment. So after Auto American, to catch their breath, the band took a much-needed break from each other. And Blondie's 3 principal songwriters, Deborah Harry, Chris Stein, and Jimmy Destri, turned their attention to solo projects. With Harry together with Stein recording her debut solo album, Cuckoo, whose cover featured a picture of Debbie skewered by giant Nels. Actually, Cuckoo dropped on July 27, 1981 and reached #25 in the US. Unfortunately, its lead single backfired, That's actually what it was called. It lived up to its name. It stalled at number 43 on the Hot 100.
Just for hamburgers to go backfire.
To pick up the slack, though, Chrysalis released The Best of Blondie in October of '81, which unsurprisingly went double platinum in the US. And then by the end of the year, Blondie was pushed back into the studio, to keep that momentum flowing, or for the label, the money flowing. Gathering in New York's Hit Factory studios in December, Blondie began recording their sixth studio album, The Hunter. This was released in May of '82. The Hunter featured the single Island of Lost Souls, which did climb to number 11 in the UK, but barely broke the US top 40 at number 37. The record took a dramatic tumble down the US albums chart, though, ending up with a number 33 ranking, worse than her solo album. It's actually Blondie's worst showing since Plastic Letters in 1977. I mean, by Blondie standards, this was a commercial flop. Even the production magic of Mike Chapman couldn't save what he felt was an uninspired record. His words, actually Mike Chapman said about it, "They seemed almost disinterested, although they put on a brave face. I could tell that things were different now, and I knew that this would be the last Blondie album." Adding to the complications was the fact that Chris Stein was losing weight at an alarming degree. He was diagnosed with pemphigus vulgaris, a rare autoimmune disease. The guitarist, he was actually fighting for his life. And Blondie's European tour was canceled when it became clear that Chris Stein was too sick to carry on. By October 1982, it looked as if, at least for the foreseeable future, Blondie was finished. The good news is that with the help of Debbie Harry's selfless care, Chris Stein eventually recovered, and as it turned out, so did the band, Blondie. That would take a little bit longer, actually much longer. Skip ahead to the late 90s, and after a number of solo albums and outside projects, the lineup of Debbie Harry, Chris Stein, Jimmy Destri, and Clem Burke, they reunited to tour Europe. It was their first series of dates in, I think it was 16 years. Blondie then followed that up with a new LP called No Exit in 1999. The album featured the number 1 UK hit Maria, which became their sixth and final chart topper across the pond. It's a strange and fickle industry for sure. I mean, one of the great wonders of the music world is this. How does a band like Blondie, who absolutely dominated for a period of time, they redefined music, the radio, styles, genres, everything. Let me get more specific. I mean, for a little over 2 years, Blondie was arguably the biggest band in music. Definitely the biggest new wave band of their era. I guess you could argue the Police, but with 7 huge hits, including 4 number ones, and most of these are classics that we still play today. No doubt we're going to play them 500 years from now. So again, 7 hits in 2 years, 4 number ones, and then they never had another hit in America. I mean, how does that happen? Blondie deserved better. And of course, it wouldn't really matter because the band would continue to make great music regardless if mainstream radio ignored them or played them or not. They did choose to ignore them. Blondie would then drop The Curse of Blondie in 2003, as well as 3 more studio albums in 2011, 2014, and 2017. And in 2006, they celebrated their 30th anniversary with an induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Producers, it's been really great. Thank you.
There's no doubt about it. Deborah Harry is an icon, a legend. Many of music's biggest acts that have come after has cited her as a major influence, as well as the band. I mean, Blondie is a legendary band that mucked up the mainstream, and they went their own way. And the music of the 70s and early 80s is better for it. They left their imprint, and I tell you what, we could use a band with their sound and vision right about now, don't you think? Thanks so much for watching. Leave us a comment about Blondie. The tide is high. What are your memories of this song? What are your memories of this band? Why did Blondie bust up after that? Why didn't they have more hits? This is something that, it's just crazy. Let's talk about it below. Let's have a great discussion. Let's celebrate this incredible band. If you like our content, we invite you to subscribe to have you as part of our community so you can get the best of our interviews and our stories of rock, pop, and soul. Until next time, 3 chords and the truth, my friends.